Should we defund the police? This is a question that I've been hearing a lot, and I thought it would be good to try to explain what I've learned about that so far. So, defunding the police doesn't mean getting rid of the police completely. You may hear people saying abolish the police because there is a goal for some people that there will be a time in the future where we don't need police in the form that they are now. But when people say defund the police, all they mean is redistribute the budget so that less money goes into policing and more money goes into social services and housing and healthcare and rehabilitation. And for some people that sounds wild. Like how could we lower the budget for police? That seems wild. But we've been lowering the budget for education for decades. And the police budget just keeps going up and up. And it doesn't mean that crime rates have gone down. Crime has gone up. People in prison has gone up. So what is all this money and all these police doing if there's still more people ending up in prison? And the problem is, having more police doesn't mean that crime goes down. Crime is directly a response to having poor and subpar social conditions. If there isn't good education programs and after-school programs, if there isn't good rehab programs for addiction, if there isn't good mental health services, if there isn't good housing, people end up causing crime. So this is, of course, happening in underprivileged communities, usually minority groups, especially Black communities. Instead of the police who punish people for committing crimes, we could put money into areas so that we prevent people from causing crimes. And there's only so much money to go around. If we think about it as a pie, there's only this much budget. And if this much goes to the police, then only this much can go to public housing and this much to social services, etc. And the bigger the budget for the police gets, the smaller the budget for everything else is. But the crime is a direct response to those areas being underfunded. So people end up causing more crime and end up going to prison, and they don't get the help that they need, either from rehabilitation from addiction or mental health services, and they end up causing more crimes. And in some cases, police use excessive force. In many cases, police use excessive force, and those people lose their lives. I'm sure you've heard the acronym ACAB, or All Cops Are Bastards. And for a lot of people, that's hard to swallow because you think, but there are good cops that are out there trying to do good work. But the structure of policing in itself is flawed. I mean, it stems from historically slave patrols who would try to capture slaves who tried to escape to freedom. So that's pretty messed up to begin with. And it doesn't matter if there's people in the system that are trying to do good when all it takes is a few bad eggs at the top to make the whole system not work. In 1963, a scientist named Stanley Milgram wanted to conduct an experiment to find out how people could have been involved in World War II, the genocide of Jewish people, like seemingly good people. How could they stand by or even perpetrate the, extermination of an entire type of people? And so he conducted an experiment, and it had two people involved. It had an actor playing a learner, and it had the person that the experiment was really being tested on, who was playing the teacher, who had no idea what it was actually about. They were told it was a memory test. So what happened is there was a scientist in a coat, and there was a curtain between these two people. The teacher is given questions to tell the learner. Every time the learner gets one wrong, the teacher is meant to send an electric shock to the learner. Of course, these shocks were fake, and the actor is faking having an electric shock, but the teacher doesn't know that. Each time the learner gets one wrong, the teacher is told to increase the voltage by the scientist in the coat. These go up and up and up to a point of being actually harmful and lethal. And all it takes is the scientist telling the teacher, you must continue the experiment. You need to go on. You need to continue doing this. That it meant that 2/3 of ordinary people, because they were being told by an authority figure in a white coat that they needed to conduct this experiment, continued to perpetrate harm to the point of potentially killing the other person, who was luckily an actor and absolutely fine. But these horrifying results show that people in uniform telling other people what to do makes you act irrationally against maybe your innate desire to be good and protect people. If you're being told shoot, shoot, shoot by the person in charge of you, chances are you're probably going to do it. And that's why the police are extremely dangerous in the way that they work now. And that's why excessive force is such a problem. And we see so many people, innocent people, dying because they're being killed by police using extreme force. So the question becomes, how can one defend the police? Has it ever been done? And luckily, it has. In 2013, Camden, New Jersey, which at the time was one of the most dangerous cities in the world, it had one of the highest murder rates, it was definitely the most dangerous city in North America at the time, decided to have a complete overhaul of their police force. They fired every single person that worked for the police and allowed them to reapply, get a psych test, and approximately only half of the people were actually readmitted onto the police force. And a whole new system of trying to de-escalate situations went into play. Camden was able to reduce their crime rates tremendously. Their murder rate dropped by 70%, their violent crimes dropped by 46%, and their complaints of excessive force by police went down by 95%. This is a town with so much history of violence and poverty, and yet the police, by taking a new stance of de-escalating, trying to make sure things don't get out of control so there doesn't have to be excessive force, so there doesn't have to be as much violence, meant that there's been a tremendous amount of less loss of life. The police chief that kind of perpetrated this whole change made a very good point that a lot of the time people that are committing crimes are suicidal, or they are mentally unwell, addicted to drugs, and people who are just out of the police academy, usually young people with just a high school diploma, are given weapons. They're given guns and batons and tasers, and they're expected to deal with these levels of crimes and people going through mental distress. So instead, money needs to go to professionals that know how to handle those situations. We need more emergency mental health services. We need more rehabilitation services. And so in the end, we need money to go into areas where we will prevent crime from happening, so that we don't need as many police, and that we need the police to be trying to use methods that reduce violence, calm things down, instead of getting out of control. Because as we've seen time and time and time again, Black people are being killed by police when it's completely unnecessary. And so, in short, should we defund the police? Hell yes.